Welcome, everyone. My guests today are Amy Gromowski, Vice President, Head of Data Science at CoreLogic, and Anand Singh, the Vice President of Gen AI Property Insights at CoreLogic, to talk about all things AI. We're here at the AI Summit hosted by HousingWire, and I'm excited to dive in. You guys, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I'm so excited. So I'm seeing you in person. We are looking at each other's face. We're here at HousingWire's AI Summit, and we are in the beautiful George W. Bush Presidential Library. This is our venue. And so it's super exciting to talk to you about these kind of issues that we're covering at the AI Summit. So let's jump in. Let's start with the importance of the building blocks for AI. And a lot of that concerns data, right? We know that if that's not right, nothing else is going to be right. What shape does your data need to be in to really take advantage of AI?
You're spot on. There is no AI recipe without the data being the ingredient. It's fascinating. AI has been there for many, many decades now. We have known to do AI based on rules, based on logic, to then machine learning, deep learning, and more recently, generative AI. But all throughout, as we have been managing the flow of artificial intelligence, one thing that has stayed consistent is the data. It's also mind blowing on how much accelerated that growth has been with the AI in the amount of data that gets fed into it. You look at some of the recent foundational models that are coming out, they're getting trained on huge amount of data. They go into trillions of words that are getting used for the training data set, which is fascinating because you look at an average human, a 30-year-old, only has about 250 million words in their vocabulary. So artificial intelligence to surpass even the training data set on how much data goes into these models for them to be able to respond, for them to be able to predict, for them to be able to write text, compose music, create art is really, really fascinating in terms of technology. But your question about the shape of the data, I mean, the size of the data that goes into the models is one thing, but you also have to acknowledge that when it comes down to AI making some real decisions, especially because we are here talking at Housing Wire, so think about real estate interactions, real estate transactions. If somebody wants to make decisions on underwriting, somebody wants to make decisions on, can I write this policy? Can I make a risk assessment based on an AI model? At that point in time, the size of the data matters, yes, but what is more important is the data really accurate? Is the data a source of truth that I can rely on? And when you combine the source of truth data into the AI model, the results are something that you can depend on. And that's all that we have been doing at CoreLogic, where it's been about getting the data into a single source of truth. How do we look beyond the biases of the data to come to a point where combining that power of single source of truth data along with the AI models that give us the answers that we can rely on?
Yeah, I would add around the data. I mean, Anand just covers it perfectly. There's, coverage, how much data you have, and is it comprehensive? The currency of it, how, recent is it and actually representative of current state as well as history, right? To build AI solutions, you often have to be looking at some point in history to be able to look at, what do we expect for the future, right? A lot of AI is about predictive analytics. So having that depth and breadth and diversity of data, right? We can solve why I love my job as a data scientist and leading a data scientist team is the diversity of data to solve problems, unique problems, or common problems in a unique way. So there's a lot of facets when it comes to data and how to think about the importance of data as it relates to AI.
So is there some sort of standard that if you're working with a client, you're like, listen, here like there's a number you can give them, like this is the amount of data that you have, or is it just different with every single client? Like even if they have smaller data, you're like, we can go ahead and work with that.
I think it lesser depends on the type of client.
Okay.
As I said, it's more about the quality of the data, the accuracy of the data that gets fed into the AI. Because the better the data, more accurate the data that goes into the model, better the prediction that's going to be. And that you can then start applying to a number of different workflows across the real estate industry in how the decisions are made. So we pride ourselves on understanding the different types of data, removing biases from that data, ultimately to create that source of truth that people can rely on, and then make accurate predictions, inferences from the data that can then be infused into a client workflow for them to be able to make accurate decisions out of it.
Yeah, I'd say not every problem requires every data asset that you have, right? So it's, do you have the right data to solve that problem, in a way that meets the needs of the end user or the client, or whatever use case you're talking about, and having kind of the discipline around what is the right data and what does it take to solve that problem, and really just focusing on that. So quantity is important, but I think it's more about the quality, as Anand was saying, and also the expertise, right, around how do we uniquely solve a problem and what data is required, because you want to do it in an efficient and cost-effective way as well.
Sure. I like that you use the word infused, right? Like we hear so much about integration, which of course that's with the actual technology, but infused is really an interesting word to me to use. Like you're leveraging what you're getting out of that and putting it into something else. It has to work with what you already have too, right?
It is interesting actually when the latest advancements with generative AI, they started to get masses eyeballs on it, started to garner the headlines. We actually went to the latest models, whether it's through OpenAI or Google, and asked them questions that a real estate professional would ask them. Hey, can you tell me, if I were to underwrite this property, what would be my risk profile? Or can you advise me properties with certain characteristics? And very quickly you will realize, because these models have been trained on public knowledge, what is available on the internet. Yes, the size is massive, but they're still unable to answer those precise questions. And usually they'll point you back into some articles on the internet or summarize them, but they cannot answer pinpointed questions which the real estate professionals care about. So, infusion of that accurate, high quality source of truth data into the AI models is the unlock that we keep going back to. I recently read a quote that really stuck with me, carrying on to that notion of infusion, of how intertwined AI and data is. It read that your AI needs to be fueled by data, but your data needs to be unlocked by AI. So it goes both ways in how interesting that fact is.
I love that. I've never heard that before. So that's news to me. That's really interesting. Let's talk about responsible AI. It's one of the topics of the sessions we're having today. And it's something that I don't know that a lot of people understand or are familiar with. And one of the things about CoreLogic is you are a very, mature technology company. You're mature in your AI technology. So how do you think about responsible AI? How would you define that?
At CoreLogic, we're in the business of making property professionals' lives easier, accuracy, more efficient, all the things, right, that are touch real estate, mortgage, insurance. And so we have a tremendous opportunity to do that, but we also have to do that in a very responsible way. We owe that to our markets and to our clients. And so for us, responsible AI comes down to kind of three main considerations. Data use rights. We have a lot of data. Just because we have it, we can use it to solve problems and create new insights and AI solutions. We have to make sure we're doing that under our legal contracts and obligations of what we can to use that data. So that's first. Second is around kind of some ethical considerations, right? So we do a lot to ensure that we don't have any disparate impact in our models, right? That it's all fair lending and any sort of consumer friendly, ensuring that it's fair and equitable. And then lastly is around just because we can build it, should we, right? What is our ethical obligation and just reputational risk around any of the solutions that we build? So it has to pass all of those tests, and we have a very strong governance program around that, very strong process and sets of committees. And our committees consist of all parts of our organization. So some of the obvious members of that committee would be technology, our science, our analytics, legal and compliance, but we also have our communications team, our public policy team, our HR team, all involved in that governance committee, and ensuring that as an organization, we are all aligned and adhering to responsible AI.
I think that's so important because this is a brand new thing to a lot of people, but you guys have been doing this for a long time, even on the AI part. But you're used to regulated industries. You're used to like ESG. You're used to like having this looked at and what is that going to mean? Because we just had a session about regulation on this, and they were very clear that it's like you have to be able to explain how you did the model. You have to be able to explain how you got this thing. So you're not just able to go out there and experiment and like let that loose on the world. And when it comes to lending, when it comes to real estate, when it comes to these different things, that's it. We have different considerations. And so I do feel like that's something to point out, that CoreLogic has decades of, maybe not in AI, but understanding how those governance things happen.
And we've been doing some form of AI, right? We talked this morning here around the definition of AI, and it has changed over time. And we have been on the forefront as far as the technology can take us, right? Building those kinds of solutions. So that's where our strong program comes from, a long established history. And every piece of intelligence or solution that we create goes through a strong governance program or process, I should say, that includes, can you explain this model? And it includes outside legal counsel that comes in. It's not just our own internal counsel. Our internal counsel focuses more on ensuring that we're following process across all the teams, as well as just monitoring what's happening out in the regulatory environment and bringing that back into CoreLogic.
Amy covered it really well. I think the bar that we set for ourselves is really high, which then reflects in the solid governance structure that we have put internally, both to manage what our AI models spit out as outputs, because they are the ones, that data is going to be the ones that get used in somebody's workflows. But it's also interesting, particularly to our industry within real estate, how biased this industry is. Because you look at different professionals that touch different pieces of the workflow of how real estate transactions happen. Everyone comes with their own bias. A listing agent may have a very different bias than an appraiser, to maybe an assessor, to maybe somebody making a decision on a property. So our governance model in how we do responsible AI, I think Amy covered it really well in terms of the outputs in how they get used. But it starts from the basics of understanding the data that's getting inputted into these models. Is there bias? The more we can do upfront with that in removal of those biases, the better the outputs are going to be. And that's what our governance committee actively looks at. Yes, one in terms of technology, but also in terms of, is this viable? Is this responsible? Is this meeting the compliance needs of the regulatory environment as well?
Well, this, segues great into very well into my next question, which is about security, right? So this is the other part. We just had this CrowdStrike outage, and that, as far as we know, is not a security breach. It shows us just the reach that technology can have, right? And we all know of all the breaches that we've had within, whether it's mortgage or title or, real estate, whatever, and we see that. So you feel like you're putting in AI, there's so many benefits there. There's also some risk. So talk to me a little bit about how CoreLogic ensures that there's so much security here.
It's really an extension of the responsible AI, as we were talking about. We look at security with two main pillars behind it. One, of course, you touched on technology, where any of the AI models that we are deploying are not public models. They are well controlled within our environment, so that we can control them, we can monitor what goes into those models, what is coming out of those models. They stay within our environment to a point where they're actively being monitored for any security lapses. They're being monitored to understand, is there any malware that can impact these models and overall functioning of them. So there is an entire piece around security from a technology standpoint. But equally important is the security around data, which becomes more and more important now with the amount of data, as we were talking about in the earlier topic, where you don't want the models to start spitting out some data that may be against some good practices, that may result in a bad decision making, that may result in a sensitive data going out in the public, for example. So technology is a strong pillar around security and how we can control the environment in which the AI lives. And by AI, I don't mean just the model itself, is the entire gamut, end to end, from the data, the model, the deployment, the pipelines, the outputs, the workflows. That's the entire technology piece of it. And then the second pillar is the data. We don't want any kind of sensitive data going out in the public that may harm what is happening within our environment, but for our clients as well.
And if I could just add, generative AI really has created kind of a new level of complexity, right? It's the first technology that I can think of that is just widely available to the average person who's just sitting at their computer, right? Anybody can go out onto OpenAI and into ChatGPT and put any data, ask it any question, and have it, give an answer. And as soon as that happens, that data that you've put in there becomes publicly available. So for us, and to the data protection, security, privacy, and the fact that data is the currency, right, and the differentiator for AI, it's been about an education for our whole organization about what's appropriate, and kind of thinking through what's at stake when you decide, like, hey, I'm just gonna go pull this data if they have access to it, right, and ask some questions into ChatGPT because I'm playing around, or I have a new idea, right, that I want to play. Like, it's a very real. The intentions can be good, but not thinking about the exposure that can create for us. So just the how prolific it is to and accessible for AI now, where before you had to have a very set skill set, trained skill set of people with access to pieces of technology that were well just within your environment, and that's it, right? And who you turn that on and off to was much more controlled than it is today. So
I had not
new
even
risks.
thought about that part of it.
Yeah.
Is that, like, obviously we know that there's misinformation, right? But even if people aren't trying to do misinformation, just the fact of, like, that it's open to anybody, who knows what they're saying or asking or
Right.
querying, or,
Right.
what is. I just had not even thought about that.
Yeah.
That's even scarier.
And so for us, the way that we're looking at, I don't want to say combat it, but really creating a safe space for R&D and exploration is becoming an R&D organization where we have a sandbox that's available for anybody in our organization that holds our data safe and secure, the LLMs and the technology that we choose to bring into it, and then opening it up for kind of a low code R&D experience for the whole organization. That's a safe way that we're going after.
I love that.
Innovation.
Well, let's get some practical use cases here, because I know that people are like, they love hearing about AI, but I also think it becomes, the rubber hits the road when you think, what can I do with it for my business? So I would love to hear, some of the use cases that you work on with your clients.
Yeah, there is a whole broad gamut where AI gets applied. I think we have
How
mentioned
many
it.
hours do we have?
Yeah, we can really go on and on this one. But yeah, as we were talking earlier, AI is not new to CoreLogic. We have been doing it for many, many decades now. The valuation models is a result of AI. Risk assessment models is a result of AI. Our image extraction factory, in how we look at images and deriving attributes that go into our supply chain, is a good example of AI. So we can go on and on and on across real estate use cases, mortgage use cases, in assisting people in making decisions around loan servicing, origination, risk assessment, even on the insurance side, on the claims and contractor side as well. But the generative AI opens up a whole set of new use cases that we're now venturing into, which, if you look at the broader industry and how it's adopting it, you can categorize them into different kinds of things that generative AI brings to the forum. So one is around conversational, where now AI can start assisting into the conversations that we're having with the clients, whether these are customer service chatbots to assist them in their workflows, or whether it's about conversation happening on top of the data as well. So there is a conversational piece. There is a operational piece around AI now assisting all of our software engineering practices. our software engineers in writing better code, writing code faster. So everything acceleration internally around our use cases. The next one is really around using AI to interpret the data or talk to my data. So no longer we're operating in a world where you will have to get trained on what buttons to push, what filters to apply, how do I use this platform, versus now all you need to know is English language and you can come in and start having a conversation, irrespective of the use case that you are in. Hey, find me properties in a certain area that meet my criteria, or help me understand the risk to my portfolio. Now, all you need is that English language. And the last but not the least is around agents. So we talk about AI enabling data agents, customer agents, security agents, which then really start to accelerate your workflow in AI being a co-pilot to you or an assistant to you in everything that you have been doing on a day-over-day basis. So it's all the AI that we have been doing over many decades, and then it's the Gen AI piece that is accelerating the experience part for all the professionals that use our data and the solutions thereof.
Yeah. So the broad umbrella on that, and I mentioned it earlier, is making property professionals' lives easier, right? So whether you're a risk manager, and it can be in any one of the industries you serve, it could be in mortgage, it could be in insurance, right? How you we provide solutions, right? We think about, the growth and retention of a business in a very cost-effective and low-risk way. Workflows, as Anand mentioned, right? How we can change the workflows. We went from having paper and pencil workflows, right, back in the day, and we digitized those exact workflows, and we started pre-filling information into those workflows. But now with generative AI, image analytics, right, it really takes us to change the game and allow property professionals who are on the front lines with the consumers to focus on the consumer and focus on the unique talents that they bring to the table, and leave the administrative stuff, right, to the AI. So that's really the approach. That's how we think about the value proposition of our use cases.
When it comes to workflow, I was interviewing a mortgage lending executive in the fall, and he was talking about how 4 years ago, for instance, to have a dashboard that would bring all these things up and show him, like, that was it. That was so
Yes.
great. He was like, now he's like, I don't want a dashboard. I want the AI to tell me, like, I don't want it to put all those things for me to make a decision. I want the AI to make the decision. Like now, and it's so wild to think about, like, that workflow around that technology, which was really great 4 years ago, is now even like, he's like, I don't want to build any more
It's old
dashboards.
and stale.
Yeah,
tell me exactly what I need to do. Like,
Right.
analyze it for me, make a recommendation, even spin up some tasks, right, and send it off to my team to, go investigate this or whatever it might be. We've been referring to those as, and I think it's really just broadly in the AI kind of world around, AI agents, right? And so that's what we're thinking about as well, as far as the infused workflows, right? How we infuse AI and create agents. So whatever the property, whomever it is, and whether we're talking real estate, mortgage, or insurance, the restoration, workflow, like post events, that's a very complex workflow, right? We touch all of that, and so we have a real opportunity to bring so much value so that people can get their homes restored faster. People can get in their homes faster when they're, moving and buying and selling a home. That whole experience can be just so much better for everyone.
The consumption part of these data and insights that help me make decisions faster or assist me in making decisions is really interesting. But with the advancements and how quickly the technology is progressing, with now AI models being able to write text or create art, create music, is also very applicable to real estate industry as well. So if you're a professional, you can now use these AI models to say, hey, you already have all the data. Can you help generate a listing for me? Can you help write an appraisal report for me? Can you generate some drawings of this property? Can you create a virtual environment about this property? So the day to day and how property professionals do their job, that's the one that is getting easier and easier by the day. Yes, I can consume information much more easily. Somebody can assist me in making decisions, but somebody can also, by somebody I mean AI, somebody can also help me in doing my job that I have been doing as mundane over many, many years in a much more easier manner as well.
So I've been to the Discovery Center at CoreLogic, which is so fun to see just the amount of information you have on every property and just to think about all that data working together. I think one of the strengths of CoreLogic is, you're not just in one industry. You have property data and it's deployed across all these different industries. How do you feel like that comes in and helps you inform, your clients? You work with them because you're not just seeing it from their perspective.
You mean we're not just seeing it from one individual client's perspective?
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we do have the real advantage, I would say pleasure, of being able to see. Again, I'll come back to the property professional, right? Because we are in the business of serving in the real estate space, the mortgage space, and in the insurance markets, right? So all of those markets. And if you think about those markets, it all comes down to property professionals. You have a real estate agent or brokers, right, who are in the property and they are servicing an end consumer by helping them buy or sell their home. And there's a whole workflow around that. You've got lenders and servicers, right, who have whole workflows that are helping to, or are underwriting loans and servicing loans, and how do you do that in a very cost-effective and efficient and high-accuracy way. And then in insurance, you've got underwriting and claims process, and these are all property professionals, right? So there's this idea that we need to have as much information as possible about the property. We need to be able to generate some sort of outcome that helps in this transaction. And so regardless if you're talking about a real estate agent or if you're talking about, a mortgage, a lender who's underwriting the property, or if you're talking about a claims adjuster or an inspector or an appraiser who's in the property, the idea that we can be collecting that information, extracting contents from that information, and influencing and changing workflows, they're all the same whether you're talking about, regardless of the persona and the person that's in the property. So we can take a step back a bit and look and say, hey, if we build these types of solutions and intelligence, while the end user and the use case might be a little bit different, the fundamental capabilities that are driving that are pretty much the same. So coming to the table and saying, this is what we hear, right, across the board. This is what we hear that's unique to this industry or to this professional. And here's our ideas. Here's where we can go with it. That's where we usually start with that conversation. I know it took me a while to kind of get there, but the idea that we have the privilege, that's the word I was really looking for earlier, right, to understand all that and build solutions that scale. It helps our clients, right, be able to innovate quickly and cost effectively. It allows us to provide this amazing opportunity to, right, change these markets and change how property professionals do their job. So for us, it really starts by understanding that. It starts by understanding what their unique pain points are for their business, right? There's a uniqueness to that. Everybody's got different objectives, whether you're a small startup or you're, a big organization, big lender or servicer. Getting in there and understanding that, and then coming to the table with ideas. And as we innovate, we're really taking an approach of let's build for scale, let's build for reusability, but ultimately release things in beta form. Get it into the hands of end users. We heard this morning about it's about changing people's behavior. That's very true. We can sit and we can ideate with our clients and we can think about what's going to be a great solution to develop, but until you get it into users' hands and you get the feedback from them of like, this is valuable, this isn't, would I use it? That's where the real information is. So the feedback loop, the constant partnership, right? We heard about partnerships with clients. That's how we approach, really solutioning. We want to be there for the long term, help our customers grow while we grow, and really just think about what's the long-term vision and execute on that. But we have to balance quickness, right? We have to deliver and innovate quickly, but we also have to do it responsibly, and we have to do it for scale. So it's a balance. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's complex.
Does. No, it is complex.
I am so glad to hear that you had a good experience in discovery. It's so fascinating. Every time I go in, I think we all within CoreLogic maintain a book of what about this, what about that ideas, because you sit in that room, you look at the breadth and depth of the data. It sparks a lot of ideas on what you can do within your day to day, how it may impact your business, how it may benefit your business. To your question, Sarah, the unique advantage that we have is to be able to understand the cross section of patterns, where as a professional or as an organization who may touch one point of the workflow within a larger real estate transaction, you may not know what happens in the other dots around the same transaction. So, for us to be able to understand if we're hosting somebody from an investor or a builder or a developer community, how they are thinking about their decisions, strategic decisions on where to invest, where to build, where new developments are going to come through, are going to be very applicable to a real estate market. I mean, you can imagine why brokers and agents would want to capitalize on that. You could imagine why a mortgage company or a lender may want to know the same information. Or think about the extractions that we may doing on the real estate side, trying to understand the behaviors of what people are liking in these days, or what kind of characteristics does these properties exhibit, are also very applicable on the insurance side. The risk assessments, you may believe that it's more on the insurance side, but a lender also cares about them deeply. So the connection of the dots, the cross section of those patterns, this truly start to come out in those discovery center conversations, and that's what we take pride in as well.
And that's why you guys built it, right? Is because it is truly a discovery center where it's like, let's see what it spurs for the next thing. The last thing I wanted to ask you about is just the image, the number of images you have, the image data that you have. And now I would think with the generative AI, there's even more that you can unlock from that, because for a long time we were, what was it, OCR, or like, we were locked in some pretty archaic things. What do you want to say about what CoreLogic can do with images?
Yeah, great question. Imagery analytics and pairing that with generative AI is so powerful. So just taking a step back from an imagery data source, what do we have? There, we see into every part of the property through its ecosystem, or right through the property life cycle. So the MLS, listings, that's usually pretty staged, right? You're not going to see the bathroom in the basement that hasn't been maintained or taken care of, right? You're going to see, maybe a picture of the vanity or something. And you're certainly not going to see the crumbling foundation in that type of imagery, but certainly the exterior of the property, right? So there's value in different stages that we have access to that data. So the appraisal workflow, that's where we have the platforms, right, that appraisers are using to be in the property, and they're taking those photos. Now that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? That's what I see, or that's how I think about it. And then in the insurance space, after a claim, right? So we're seeing damage in a property, water damage in a kitchen, fire or smoke damage from a wildfire, any sort of natural catastrophe event, or just damage to a property that requires restoration. So because of that, we have so much knowledge and information that we can extract and really build unique solutions. So I can build models off of, now all with responsible AI and data use rights, but I can build models from my claims imagery to be able to identify, let's say, water damage on the floor, and I'm in the kitchen, and what's the extent of that damage. And I can use that to apply that to appraiser, right? Images that come in through the appraisal process and help auto-populate all that. Like there's damage in the kitchen, or there's crumbling foundation. We have the ability to create that kind of insight and apply it in other workflows to really streamline, right? And then you start bringing in generative AI. If you think about it, it's not just the imagery, but we have so much text. We have unstructured data, not only in the imagery, but in the text. All the the listing data, right? That's where the richness is of the information about the property. There's a new roof, recently renovated, brand new windows, whatever that might be. It's sitting in that text. Same with the appraisal form, same in the insurance, underwriting, and restoration workflows. So using large language models to decode all of that text and pair it with all the imagery has been very powerful for us as far as the solutions that we can develop and build in a very cost-effective way and very expedient way.
Our imagery, we have in total number of images that go in billions with a B, going back to our first topic around the size of the data, the quality of the data that goes into the AI models. To Amy's point, yes, we have been using images in a responsible way to extract attribution out of a property and infusing that back into our supply chain that feeds the number of platforms and solutions that our end clients are using. But then once you start connecting the dots, again to Amy's point with generative AI now, think about possibilities where you go into a property, you click a bunch of pictures, that's backed by the image extraction factory that we have. It's backed by all the other data that we collect for every property. And you start to apply generative AI to say, I've clicked these pictures, can you generate a listing from it?
Wow.
It goes all the way from listing to extraction to managing the data to an AI model to then composing text or composing art on top of it as well. So the entire automation piece with multiple AI points, touch points to it, that's really changing the game for property professionals.
There's so much
If I could just
here.
add one more thing of where we're
Sure.
going, which is super exciting, is, LiDAR technology now, just right off of iPhones, the ability for anybody, any property professional to go into a property and to automatically start identifying ceiling lines, floor lines, and creating the calculation of the living space and creating the 3D model. On top of that, the virtual reality experience, right? So we can start to create those 3D models and 3D doll houses, right? Where now I may have one property professional who gets in that house, but I can have somebody sitting at the desk who can go back in there. I can and walk through the property virtually, right? And there's all sorts of downstream kind of users then that can use that to understand what's going on with condition and quality. Even then image analytics that we can build on top of it to say, here's the contents in the property, here's the location that could be used, let's say, for insurance claims down the road, things like that, right? Measurements of windows, the type of counters and kitchen cabinets that we have and appliances. So all sorts of use cases that can come from that type of experience. Or even if I want to buy a house, my husband and I are talking about buying a second home, maybe a lake house that's 4 hours away. Imagine if I could just put on my virtual reality and walk through that property and get a feel for, the flow. So super excited. That's where we're headed. And, just technology has allowed us to really move into these spaces and think about where we can go.
I love it that all these years you've been collecting this data and using it, to good effect, but now it's almost like on steroids. You didn't know when you started collecting that data that now we're going to have generative AI. So thank you guys so much, Amy and Nan. Really appreciate talking to you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Sarah.
hosting such a great event.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.